This is Senate TV.
This is Senate TV.
This is Senate TV.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Senator
This
Corbett,
is Senate TV.
Majority Leader, and I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon for this very important topic that we will be discussing with some great experts in the field. And I appreciate the fact that you have taken time out of your busy schedules to share with us in this important discussion. I want to also, of course, thank the panelists who have also, of course, taken time out of their schedules to enlighten us on these issues, and especially Sheriff Baca for joining me in co-hosting this event, and for, thank you, yes, and your wonderful advocacy in the area of internet privacy. Very much appreciate your work and help in Sacramento this year on this important issue. Whenever you check the news these days, whether you're reading the newspaper or you're looking at news accounts on the internet, you can't take a look without reading some sort of story about the social networking websites and how they are impacting our daily lives, for better and for worse. As with any technological development that is widely adopted by society, social networking and information sharing over the internet offers great new advantages and opportunities. And we're very familiar with those. You can instantly connect with your friends and family. You can get information in real-world time about anything you care about. The ability to network and mobilize action quickly, and of course, the opportunity to build friendships. But these innovative methods of communicating come with their own set of risks and dangers, and they are being actively exploited by cyberbullies, stalkers, scam artists, and other criminals. That's why we're here today, to discuss the internet and social networking and how they are affecting our privacy, our safety, and our children. Now, please don't mistake me. We're not here to be naysayers about this wonderful new technology and about all of the great things that it brings us. But we are here today to ask, what are the pros and what are the cons of this new sweeping change in our society? And what do we need to know and what do we need to do to make the most of it? If this were 1911, we might be having the same exact summit, but on some other new technology, say the automobile, for example. Think about it. For more than a century, we've worked to incorporate automobiles into our society in a way that's safe, orderly, and beneficial to the public. It hasn't been easy. It's taken a lot of work. And despite all we've done in this regard, there are still some dangers when you get inside a vehicle to travel down the road. And don't forget, we're not saying don't drive the car, but wear your seatbelt, pay attention to the road, and drive carefully. The point is this: nearly every major change in society, every advantage brought on by new technology, requires some adjustment and some serious thought to ensure it is integrated into society in the public's best interest. As you probably know, I've been working on this issue for several years now with the help of a lot of great friends and advocates, such as Sheriff Baca. And it all began with concerned parents contacting me about what was happening with their kids. Just that simple. Earlier this year, I introduced legislation that would have required social networking sites to set their default settings to private, to protect a user's personal information. That's that person's personal information. Users could then, change that if they wish. They could change their settings and share the information if they liked. The bill would have also allowed users to request that their personal information, things such as a social security number or a home address, would be removed from a social networking site, such as Facebook or Twitter, and also be able to remove the information of their minor children upon request. And even though the legislation was very successful, unfortunately it failed by, that's right, 2 votes in the state Senate. Yeah, who's counting? But even though it failed, the response was phenomenal. We received emails and letters from across the country. We even had inquiries from other countries. They poured into the office with people saying, please don't give up, please support this very important effort. Clearly, this is an issue that concerns many people and especially worries parents. So today, we'll be having panel discussions on how social networking is reshaping society, how it's being used by criminals, and what people and the industry can do to protect the users. I welcome a very spirited conversation that will help enlighten all of us. And let me introduce some of our wonderful panelists that are here today. And Senator Baca and I will be joining in as well and helping moderate the panel discussion. The 3 panelists for the first panel who will be speaking about the new world of social networking, how is it shaping society, and how is it affecting our school children, and what are the trends. We have with us today Alan Simpson, who is Vice President of Policy for Common Sense Media, Glenn Warren, who's a teacher, librarian, and technologist, and also Vice President of Government Relations for the California Library Association, and also Holly Priebe-Diaz, who is the Intervention Coordinator of the Office of Human Relations on Diversity and Equity for the Los Angeles Unified School District. We're very pleased to have all of you. So the way that this will roll out is that we'll ask a series of questions and just ask for whoever would like to share their knowledge on the subject, please jump in. So thank you very much. I'll start with a few questions, and I'm sure Sheriff Baca will be joining me as well. So my first question is, how are kids using social networking sites today and the internet, and how young are children starting to use these social networking sites?
Well, we do know a lot about, social networks are extremely popular. They're popular with kids, they're popular with adults. We're seeing a lot more numbers about how many kids are using social networks, even at younger ages. Most social networks like Facebook have their own terms of service saying kids under the age of 13 aren't supposed to be on them, but we've seen data recently that millions of kids under the age of 13 are on social networks. And one of the concerns there is whether they've got ample protections for their information and for their data and for what they're doing online. Because when we look at, to your other question, there are a lot of fantastic things that kids are doing online and on social networks. There are great opportunities for their own exploration and learning. There are great opportunities for them to share information, both for entertainment purposes and for just socializing purposes, but also for their education. But there are also some real pitfalls that kids need to be aware of, and parents need to have more opportunities to help them manage. And so one of our concerns is an organization that is primarily focused on kids and their role in the world of media and technology. We're mostly interested in what can be done to make sure parents are fully empowered to protect young kids, and also that teens have their own empowerment and their own opportunities, not only to know what the rules are in an online space, but how to manage their own information carefully and responsibly.
Anybody else like to add to that?
How young?
Yes.
Before they're born. That's not a joke, actually, but it is funny, I have to admit. Mom is about ready to have beautiful baby, and I've had 3 of them. And I got to tell you, what an exciting experience. But when we got those ultrasounds back, now they're on a social networking site. So these kids haven't even hit the world yet, and they're already, their picture's already on the social network. So, the kids are starting before they even get to the planet. And also, by the time a child gets to kindergarten, I can't tell you how many times I have been in service and trained by a 4-year-old on how to use technology. I don't know if anybody can, I'm seeing people in the audience nodding their heads.
I've had that experience.
And we're starting education about these things when they hit middle school and high school. That's a different question for a different part of this session, but let me answer it shortly. Young, real young.
Wow. Any other responses to that question?
Just thinking that, again, students are coming in as early as kindergarten, having some knowledge of knowing how to use the internet or media-focused type games of learning their alphabets, and they're learning. And the challenge sometimes is that they know, again, like you mentioned, is that they will show their teachers how to use the computers and so forth. So we see them coming in very early, already having some experience with knowing how to use the keyboard and how to get out of default modes and so forth. So very early.
And what are these young children using the internet for? What sort of things are they doing on the internet?
I'll start by saying just the perspective from the school districts. We know that kids use the social media networks for developmentally, they want to fit in. Students find it as a safe way of getting to know, to develop their own identity, to be able to learn about each other in a safer way. It's safer to do it online than to be in person. And so students are really learning how to use the social networking to be able to connect with each other, which is something that they have not really mastered at this early age of how to do that human contact. So,
Are we seeing any particular trends?
Again, coming from the world of LA Unified, second largest school district in the nation with close to 700,000 students, one of my main focuses is to make sure our schools are safe. And so safety, and where we think about safety is making sure that our students are not victimized online, and that victimization is then not brought into the school setting, because then what we know is when bullying even though bullying, what we have typically learned as bullying on the schoolyard, parents are now starting to learn that students are able, or youth are able to even engage in bullying activities even online, away from school, on the weekends, during holidays. And so, so what we're learning is that students, although yes, there's pros about the positives of learning, engaging in different learning techniques online, but they're also socializing in non-pro-social type of ways where they may be engaging in bullying activities online. And so that's something that we have seen an increase with our students, is the online bullying.
One of the things that I've heard from parents is they are concerned about the amount of time students might be spending on the internet. And I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what you're seeing. Does heavy usage of the internet, is that impacting students in any way, positively or negatively? And is that impacting the classroom? And if you have any other thoughts too on whether the bullying activities impact what goes on in the classroom as well, and whether that is having an effect on children's ability to be successful and to learn.
Well, basically, I hope it's okay if I jump in here, is that basically we know that students can't learn if they don't feel safe. And so we recognize the importance of making sure that all students feel safe in our schools. And so immediately it's always addressed that schools must be a place that when there are situations of bullying, that we need to respond, we need to investigate, create a safe and respectful school environment. We want to make sure that that when things are happening, that students need to report. And so we need to still do, we're constantly revising policies, we're constantly trying to do trainings to make sure that students know that they're not alone, so that they can come forward and report when they're not feeling safe in school, because the learning will stop when they're not feeling safe.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts you'd like to share?
On the overall question of media use, we don't have as much data as we'd really like to get to right to your questions. The Kaiser Family Foundation has done studies before about overall media use by kids, and it's pretty stunning in the larger picture that I think their most recent numbers were that kids use media, all media, not just computers, more than 53 hours per week. In other words, they spend more time with media than they do with their parents or in school. Now, computers and online are one slice of that, and television is the biggest slice. Common Sense Media is going to continue the research that Kaiser has been doing, and we have a new study that I haven't seen yet, but it will ask some of the questions, especially about young kids, And I'm pretty sure we'll see more signs that, as Glenn said, they are starting to use computers earlier, they're starting to go online earlier, and it's becoming a bigger part of their media lives. As you said at the beginning, this is not to be a naysayer about online technology or media. There are positives and negatives there. And the question for us really isn't whether kids should be online or offline, because kids are going online. The questions should really be about how are we as parents, as teachers, and as others in kids' lives making sure they're online in the right ways, taking care of them online, and giving them the preparation they need to take care of themselves online.
I'd like to address the trend
Mhm.
question. One issue about the trends is that educators are primarily concerned about educating their kids. And many of us are digital immigrants. We immigrated into the digital world. These kids are coming in as digital natives. And as a digital immigrant, as a teacher, we size up bullying from a perspective that may be very wrong. We see a child, I was raised in New Jersey, so I got beat up a lot. No offense, New Jersey. But I was the victim a lot. Now, if I had lived in this age, equal opportunity bullying for everybody. Now, the little person who looks like they're getting picked on at school, and they may well be, the teacher doesn't know if that's coming from some other bullying that took place that they have no idea took place online. So we're now got a whole new animal that we're dealing with that, even the relationship, frankly, between law enforcement and schools. That's another trend. Another trend is when a policeman is present on the school campus. Well, it used to be, I guess, that when a principal or a teacher is dealing with a discipline issue, there's a certain discipline code that we deal with, policy. But then when law enforcement is involved at the school site, this presents new challenges that many of us aren't completely aware of where the boundaries are and what's reasonable. And we've all heard stories about people doing mindless types of implementation that the public looks at and go, you didn't do anything about that, or you overreacted to that. So, we have a trend that I guess the trend we're looking for is we need more wisdom than we've ever had. We've got lots of knowledge, but we seem to be missing wisdom.
And can I just add one other item?
Please.
That we really find is on the rise and is a trend is the sexting, the whole idea of students posting or forwarding images, either nude or semi-nude, and engaging in sexual dialogue online or forwarding it. And so the dangers behind posting those types of images online they're permanent. We try to educate our students. This may have permanent consequences. It's impossible to remove images, and so we need to continue to do more education. And so
Yes, that's right.
these are things that are really, as a parent, as well as an educator, as a social worker, we need to make sure that our parents are aware that our students feel that sexting or sending sexual images to their boyfriends or
Right.
girlfriends is a safe form of sex. That they feel that, well, if I show this, then possibly he'll like me more or she'll like me more. And so that is a trend that we are seeing that students are engaging in.
How should parents be involved? Clearly you referenced those that are newer to the technology than others or didn't grow up with the technology. I think it's difficult for parents sometimes to understand exactly what it is they can do. So how should parents get involved? What
Well,
should they
that's-
be doing to help their students?
I see parents
their
every day
children?
with their direct connection with their students, and before there's trouble, and that's the way I like it. Before there's trouble, and keep them out of trouble. I'm sure Sheriff Bogdan loves that idea. But what we see is that we talk about we don't want kids to be sexting. Well, we don't, of course. But the thing is that maybe one way to stop somebody from being a criminal or doing something that's not legal is maybe teach them about how to do something right and something good before we tell them that don't do the bad thing. In other words, and to be clear, the kids are not being taught at the youngest ages how to use mobile technologies in a positive, digital building reputation way. I had a superintendent say to me once at the AXA conference, it's for California School Administrators, he was poking fun at me because I'm from Orange County. And he said that, you know, there's a new law that basically that came out of Orange County that said you can bring your cell phone to school, that kind of thing. And he was kind of saying, thanks a lot, I have to confiscate 40 cell phones at the high school every, you know, month thanks to you guys in Orange County. And he was tongue in cheek. And everybody laughed. And I turned to him and I said, and sir, how much time are you spending educating your children, kindergarten through 8th grade, on the positive educational purpose for that device? Not 1 minute. And I don't know about you. You guys familiar with this digital device? Is anybody familiar with these? You know what? Almost every single kid has one of these things, and they are dangerous. I don't know of a single person who hasn't been harmed by one of these. I poked myself in the leg as a kid, walking down the hall. I have a permanent tattoo as a result. But the thing is that we put these in the hands of kindergartners, and you know what we do? We teach them from the moment they walk in the door how to use this in a positive and educational way. That's not happening with these types of technologies.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, especially from the education perspective, because in a lot of the online safety discussions that I get in here and in Washington, all over the place, there are a lot of concerns about the negatives, and that's certainly understandable. But one of the points that some of us end up making, a lot like Glenn just said, is I think we have to be very careful about telling today's kids that mobile phones and social networking, two of the coolest things in their lives right now, are bad for them. Because that's a message that won't go anywhere. And it's much more important to be out there proactively about embracing, as we have been here, the good things in the digital world and encouraging them to go find the great things that they can, and the great things they can do with these technologies and with these resources. And that's one more way to keep them away from the downsides in the digital space. But the other thing I'd like to say back to your other question, about privacy, about sexting, about all of these things, Common Sense Media works first and foremost with parents. We work with parents and teachers and companies and with policymakers. But the first thing we would say in this space to parents is, you can't protect your kids from the downsides that you see in this space in the online world unless you know how the online world works. And that's challenging for a lot of parents today. It's challenging for a lot of teachers. But this is where kids live today, and this is part of parenting today. Now, the other part of that equation is you also can't protect your kids in the online world unless the online companies are giving you opportunities to do so. And we think that's an important part of the equation as well.
What, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, back to basics. As a parent, again, again, back to basics, communication, communication, communication. Always have to make sure that our students, our children, know what the expectations are, how to protect themselves. Every time our children get into an automobile, we tell them, fasten your seatbelts. We teach them about looking both ways before they cross the street. We give them a set of rules and expectations and maybe help them to understand why it's important. And then the second part is parents need to be more familiar with technology. They need to not be afraid of it, but to embrace it. And they need to be aware of all the different programs that exist and be familiar with it.
Could you, we probably don't have the time to go into this in great depth, but could you give some specifics? What sort of things should parents be looking for? What sort of specific things should parents be teaching their children about the internet and social networking? I think, honestly, there are parents who are just, at the
Lost.
ends of their ropes. They
Yeah.
really don't know what to do. And
Right.
what resources are out there? What takeaways do we have for parents?
I'd like to address that right up front, because I see a lot of concern and fear in parents because, like Alan was saying, they need to, in some sense, need to know how to engage technology. But that lack of knowledge sometimes is a stopper or makes them fearful to go forward. And what I think one of the things is we can take some of the fear off parents and help contextualize it for the parents in a way that takes away that angst. And one of the ways that we try to do that in the district where I am is to say, look, you don't have to be technology brilliant, but you have wisdom that your kids need. When a child goes to a playground, you would never send a child alone to the playground. Now, do you have to get on that thing that goes around and round? I tried that. I got nauseous real quick. So I'm not 15 any longer. I don't have to ride that thing, but I do need to go to that playground with my 7-year-old. And I don't have to get on that ride, but I need to be there with them. And I'm teaching them about the wisdom that I have as a parent, how to interact socially in a face-to-face context. Parents are desperately needed with that same wisdom that they give every single day to their children in a face-to-face context in that digital space. They may not know how to work that technology, but they certainly have wisdom, and the kids don't. They don't have it. They need it.
Did you have something to add?
We have, Common Sense Media's developed a lot of curriculum for parent tips about these issues, but also curriculum tools, and some of which are aimed directly at kids. And they echo a lot of the messages that Glenn has just outlined. I mean, some of this boils down to the golden rule. When you start talking about things like cyberbullying, it's like, think about what someone just said to you and whether you want to forward that message and whether that's a really good idea or what the negative implications of it are. And sometimes it's, think about how you would feel if someone said that about you. And then in the other ways, there are things that kids need to learn, that kids are more savvy about the technology, but parents and teachers are more savvy about the world writ large,
Right,
and
yes.
need to be communicating lessons about,
Yep.
be careful with your own information. Don't, you tell me where you are but when you're coming home from school, but you don't tell everyone where you are. And that's another reason why one of the big issues here is, especially for young kids, making sure parents have ways to be engaged in those discussions and to know what their kids are doing online.
One other final point that I just wanted to add was parents know their children better than anyone. Monitor their behavior. You know when your child has lost interest in something that they
Yeah.
have
That's good.
they really care about. They're no longer interested in going out with friends or playing video games. So if their demeanor, if their grades have changed, their behavior has changed, that should be the first warning sign that parents should notice. And also, parents just need to stay involved. Parents are very consumed with their jobs. The economy is at its worst. Parents are working 2 and 3 jobs. They are tuning out of the needs of their children to a certain degree. And we just really want to make sure that our parents, stay involved as much as you possibly can. Watch, if they can't provide the supervision, make sure that there is someone else who is providing that appropriate supervision. I think it's as simple as just, again, continuing to monitor communication and monitoring that behavior.
There's one other thing I'd like to add to that I think is critically important, and that is many times when parents hear about the tragedies that happen, and we have to tell them. We have to tell them. We cannot hide that. There's also a ton of triumphs that are happening too. And many times, well, parents will hear about something negative. They'll say, "That's it. Give me your cell phone. I'm done with that. Yeah, shut that thing down." Or they get advice. Make sure the laptop is in the kitchen so everybody can see it. And so the kid never uses it, so they use their iPhone. So it's kind of silly advice now.
They visit the neighbor.
Precisely. I'm not plugging Apple, but you get the idea. The thing is that I shared with a group of kids and parents saying that, look, you're worried about sexting, you're worried about this negative stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, if you pull the kids off, I gave them an analogy that said, look, if you stop using your credit card and you pay it all off and you stop using it, I learned something. Your credit score starts to go down. How did that happen? I paid the thing off and my credit score goes down. In the future, it's not just having bad pictures of yourself on the internet that's going to stop you from getting a job or getting into college. That's today. Tomorrow, and it's coming in about 15 minutes, when somebody applies for a job or they apply for the police department and they Google that person and they find nothing on them, that's going to be the new negative. What they're going to be looking for is, what did you do that made any difference? What did you do that made a positive impact? And I'll tell you right now, companies are going to hire somebody who's moving, who's doing something good, who's trying to affect change, who's trying to help somebody, over somebody who's done nothing. So again, we need to make sure parents know that disengagement from this and shutting down may not be in their kids' best long-term interest.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point. What role do the schools play in this? Not only in taking a look at the amount of time that children may spend on the internet, you know, the usage, and are there ways that schools are helping parents to understand how they can help teach their children?
Okay, so what are schools doing? Gosh, obviously, we're working as fast as we can, but we know that at the schools are the epicenter of where students congregate, where students are learning from their peers on how to behave and what's normal and what's socially acceptable and not. And so schools have an obligation to make sure that the climate is safe, that the climate is respectful, that the climate is sending not only messages that we want you to learn and to read and write and to graduate, but we want you to be responsible, socially responsible citizens when you leave our schools. And so we have an obligation to make sure that our schools are safe places so that students can learn and graduate and move on. So the schools, obviously, things start with a policy. We have policies in place that obviously, as the trends are moving, so are our policies are being revised. We're making information available online for parents, teachers, students. Also making sure that trainings are available, and now we're moving to even electronic trainings to make sure that our students have what they need to be safe and know how to report.
I know we're running out of time, but this is,
For
Oh,
comment
good.
on this, and then
oh, good, thank
we're
you.
going to have the sheriff say a few words as well.
First of all, schools have a legal obligation. It's mild, but it's still there. California passed AB 307 years ago, 5 years ago, that said we need to teach kids how to be cyber safe and how to use technology in school. We need to teach them in school. And we also need to teach teachers. And that's K through 12th grade. The only teeth to that law was the technology money, if it wasn't implemented. But the statute's still there. And then you got a federal statute, S 1492. Now, I don't know about you, but how much poetry do you need when you hear 1492 and it's talking about teaching kids about social networking? We have to teach kids social networking, about chat rooms, and being not a bully online. Now, that's a federal statute that happened about 3 years ago. Well, schools are hurting for time, and we know that. And I heard money, and that's
money.
absolutely true. But let's just stay on the hurting part. A few years ago, and I want to just say thank you to Common Sense Media publicly for their support. Librarians in the state, we don't need librarians anymore because we got the internet and Google. But we know that's not true. What we're really facing here is not a technology problem. What we're facing here is a critical thinking problem. What we're facing here is how kids are being prepared to interact with information. And a few years ago, it was put before the State Board of Education that we would have library standards. Those standards were passed in 2010, and they were designed to answer what should a child know K through 12th grade when it comes to cyber safety and information literacy. And we were thankful that the State Board passed that. In fact, the current superintendent recognized our standards that help kids to actually learn how to be socially responsible online. So my feeling is, and hope is that we might be able to take the standards that we have, and we're working right now with Common Sense Media to align California state standards with some of the other curriculums that are out there. And if we could potentially repurpose some teacher librarians to teach this very important subject. I heard you might be a
great
fan
idea.
of libraries. I heard a rumor
Yes.
about that. And I really do, all joking aside, I really do think, math teachers are teaching math. Science teachers are teaching science. Everybody's got to get ready for the test. But if we could repurpose some of these folks that are trained in this area, I think
it's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
would echo everything that Glenn and Holly have
Just
said.
say amen.
And just quickly add a few things, which are that schools are in a great, the burden on schools is enormous, and with full appreciation for that, schools and teachers and librarians are in a great position to support parents and add to what parents are doing by getting a lot of really important lessons to kids and students about life online. The first one I would say very broadly is if we're concerned about online safety, the best way to teach kids to be safe online is to teach them to be smart online.
Amen.
And that involves lots of details, but encourage them to keep using the online world, but teach them the right way to go, the right way to behave, the right way to be respectful of others. In particular, issues like privacy, in our curriculum, we have lessons for very young kids about what is a password. And then as students get older, there are more lessons about how do you develop a strong password. And you learn why those things are important, why protecting your own information is important. And then one more big picture issue is that schools and media specialists and librarians are really especially well positioned and really need to be focused. As Glenn said, we have a lot of teaching that we have to do right now around tests that are tomorrow. But our kids need to learn 21st century skills, or they're going to be left far behind when they're adults.
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest roles in this
Yes,
space.
thank you very much. Very
well
well said. Very well said. I'm going to turn now to Sheriff Baca. We've had an opportunity to discuss these important issues. I know Sheriff Baca is very concerned about them. Sheriff Baca, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, Senator, thank you so much for convening the panels, and this has been extraordinary oversight of knowledge that we all need, as your case is mine. Mine's the recipient of your policies and the laws, and yours is the creating of policy and law. And you can't create good policy until you listen to responsible people like Ellen, Glenn, and Holly. And I also look forward to the rest of the panels coming forward in offering more expertise into this. But let me just say this. Last week we had another seminar and summit on this very subject relative to the teachers in the audience. And there were students in the audience. And I commented then in that testimony of welcoming people that I was a middle school teacher back in 40 years ago. And I also was a junior high school teacher. And then they didn't have any of these computers. But we did have something that exists today. There are kids that come to school with problems. And so as a teacher, I would open up my class with simply this. Any of you have something you're worrying about today? Would you please see me after class? You don't have to talk about the subject matter. You just need to have the open invitation that if something's bothering you, you can talk to me after class. So one young girl contacted me, hung around until everyone cleared the classroom and says, I want to talk to you. Well, I know she had to go on another period. So we circled around back for after school period, and then we went into the discussion. She was a victim of an intrafamilial sexual aggression. I'm not going to describe it any better than that. I knew what to do. She didn't know what to do. The whole point of it all is that teachers have a role to play in all this. But the policy shouldn't be just the law says this. It should be that the teacher is saying, is there something troubling you? Now, you got kids that are being threatened by gangs. You've got kids who are being troubled by food at home. You've got kids that are literally being bullied to and from school. But you have to invite them in to the problem. You're going to invite yourself into the problem. You cannot expect that they have the initiative to tell you they're in a negative internet chat box. So therefore, all the things that I've heard you say, all three of you are excellent in terms of helping us think better about this. But to me, there should be a social network and alert thing somehow that parents can acquire as a general service from the internet companies or even the transmission companies or the phone companies. The phone companies should be obligated to send the list of dangers, if that's what it's going to be, or they should be required to talk about the risks involved. So then when you get down to where we're going with the furthering of your conversation is that 93% of Americans in Consumer Report studies believe that the internet companies should always ask permission before using personal information. So you got this internet theft going on, you got this hacking going on, and if WikiLeaks can get into the America's greatest secure intelligence system, then we have a serious problem with the idea that there's hacking going on. So if they send illicit photographs of each other for the sexting kind of initiatives they're into, that stuff can go all over the place. As a matter of fact, your one young child committed suicide over some of this. And therefore, we've already have enough evidence of one suicide, and one is too many. The other is that last year, 2010, my department received more than 6,000 crime reports regarding identity theft related to the internet or ID cyber crimes. And sadly, the internet has become a tool for predators to look for their victims. And a study by the Polyclass Foundation showed that 42% of online teens say they post information about themselves on the internet so others can contact them. Now, this is 42%, meaning something's not working inside. I'm lonely, I don't have friends, no one understands me, teachers don't have time, I'm not doing well with my homework. They're reaching, and as a result, that exposes them to what could be the predator type, and then it goes from there. Sadly, it's a difficult problem, but I know that the senator and myself and those who are here are on one message, and that is we want all users of the internet to be safe, and we want better forms of guidelines and education and forms of healthy discussion. And I think Ellen's correct. I mean, you can't just talk about the negatives. You have to talk about what it's for, how it can help, but ultimately it's up to the child to decide too that they don't want to get in unsafe interneting going on. And yet I don't think they know that it's unsafe. It starts off harmless and then it works its way up. Once the trust is established, then the next nonsense comes, and then the extreme comes, and before you know it, the kid is completely captivated and can't back out as simply as just shutting the machine off. So thank you, Senator. I do have a few things to deal with back in the sheriff's office, and I believe that this has been healthy for me, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule, and your strong advocacy on behalf of individuals and their safety on the internet is very much appreciated. I'm sure here in LA as well as in Sacramento at the state capitol. So appreciate you for all you do. Thank you, Sheriff Baca, very much. Thank you. As Sheriff Baca is leaving the stage, we do have time for a question from the audience for this panel. If there's anyone who would like to ask a question of this particular panel, will you please so indicate? Yes, sir.
I've got one question for Glenn.
There's a microphone right here, if you don't mind taking the microphone right there to your right. Thank you very much.
I've got one question for Glenn. I work as a prosecutor who handles various of these types of actual cases. I have been unable to find any materials, either online or with any training group, that deals with the cyber bully, how they should be dealt with, what programs they should be worked through, what steps should be taken with them. In your extensive research, have you come across anything that is designed to deal with the bully rather than the bullied?
Wait a minute, I missed the last part. Deal with the bully rather than the bully?
No, dealing with the bully rather than the person being bullied.
Dealing with the bully?
Yes.
Like restorative or punitive or both?
Restorative.
Wow, there's coming from a prosecutor, that's fabulous. Bless you. There is, in terms of the law itself, AALRR, which is probably the largest law firm to education in this state, an attorney by the name of Penny Glover is actually leading that effort, and we work together. It's kind of funny. It's sort of like Martin and Lewis when we're together. She's the serious one. But she's got tremendous work there in weaving what that can look like together from a policy standpoint, even from a legal standpoint. In terms of restorative for the bully themselves, I have not seen that heart in anything yet, because typically it's been focused on the victim, and then right now the trend is trying to empower the bystander to be more of an upstander. But in terms of bringing redemption, in essence, because a person who bullies, people misunderstand what bully means. Somebody does something once, that's not a bully. It's repetitive. There's actually clear language that describes what real bullying is based on many university studies, and it's a repetitive motion. It's going on. But to turn that around, sometimes it's a sign that something really bad's happening at home, as you know. So I haven't seen anything awesome. Have you seen?
Well, I know you were asked the question to Glenn, but basically, we look at it from the framework that most bullying or violence is a learned behavior. So we know that we can unteach it. And so we have programs in our schools that we use. We have various programs in our schools where we work specifically to teach kids who are engaging in bullying behavior, teach them empathy, teach them how to be empathetic towards their victims, because empathy is a component that is missing from a lot of kids who engage in the bullying behavior. So that's one thing. So there's various programs that teach empathy, teach impulse control, and anger management. Those are three major components that are missing from students who engage, or youth who engage in bullying behaviors. And when it goes unresolved, we know that bullying behavior can escalate into what we now know as domestic violence, teen dating, child abuse, and other forms of abuse. So yes, there maybe I can't cite the specific research at this moment, but we know that most youth who engage in bullying have been a victim at some point somewhere else down the line. They learn the behaviors from somewhere. And so that's the lens that we like to approach our students, is that we are here to help them as well as the victim.
The only thing I'd add to that is that the particular challenge that a lot of schools face with the online version of this, with cyberbullying, bullying was much simpler because it was a schoolyard issue or it wasn't.
Right. Like
Now,
when I
this,
was at
as
school.
you know, and as Glenn knows, there's a huge jurisdictional question for a lot of schools. It may be more clear in some districts than in others, but they are, school leaders are getting it from both sides. They're getting complaints that they didn't address a cyberbullying issue that really didn't start in the school. It started from someone's home. And then they're getting attacked from other sides that they addressed things too soon, or they got engaged in what was not a school issue. So you have a lot of school leaders facing a real challenge of not only do they not have particular tools for a particular part of the equation, they're not even sure exactly when and where they should step in.
I'd like to come back and say that I have not seen anything that really says to the student community, once a child has made that change, what do we do to bridge the gap from the isolation that was created from their actions to their peers? And that is so critically important. And I think what's happened is we've become a world of reds and whites and blues. Is that Republican, Democrat? I'm not quite sure. Okay, thank you.
Red, white, and blue.
Notice I went right
Red,
to
white,
America.
and blue.
Isn't that wonderful? But are you a blue or are you a red? Are you, are you this or are you that? And it's become so, binary. And life is far more complex than that. And I think it would be worth working. Our organization would work with anybody at this point that would be willing to explore that. If you would like to explore that, we would work with you to that end. By the way, I want to mention something Sheriff Bacchus said that I thought was amazing. First of all, he's a teacher. That's fabulous. But he told his kids to talk to him. Wow. And the reason I say that is that many kids, the data that we're getting back is many kids don't tell their parents they're being bullied.
Right.
I wonder why. One of the reasons is they're convinced there's going to be an overreaction from their parents,
Right.
and everything's going to be taken away from them. And one of the things that Sheriff Bacchus said is that he made a safe context for those kids to be able to tell them, and I'm sure he wasn't judgmental back at them, but he was a good listener. And I think one of the things we definitely need to understand with educators, district officials, and with parents, overreaction can prove deadly. We really, in a sense, have got to learn to listen to our kids. And some of our schools are setting up feedback loops that are digital, where a child can report something that's going on, and it gets to the school. It's not reported to the police. It's kept to the school, and it can be handled more in that fashion as things are beginning to escalate before they become a problem. That feedback loop for a school, I think, should be required for every school. I don't know about what you think about that, but
Well, we're on the way. We're on the way. We need to have this.
wasn't trying to lay that on LA Unified, I was just simply saying.
Bring it on.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Well, unfortunately,
You're kidding.
we're running out of time. But one thing I can tell from this panel is you're very committed to the subject and very committed to our children and the future. And I'm sure that you would love to talk on for hours about this. I can imagine that each and every one of you can be found on the internet with some sort of website or another, which I will be glad to allow you to share if you'd like on our
Yes.
webcast.
Yes.
But let me just thank each of you by name. Let me thank the panelists, Alan Simpson from Common Sense Media and Glenn Warren with the California School Library Association. Again, Holly Preby-Diaz from the Los Angeles Unified School District. Your information was outstanding today, and I think will help a lot of people in trying to make sure that they can protect their children. And if you would like to briefly give a resource where any of you might want to be reached, you don't have to do that, but if you would like to, or people can get more information, I'd love to allow you to do that.
Sure. LA Unified School District, we're at lausd.net, and but our particular office is humanrelations.lausd.net, or my email address. And I don't know if it's on there as well, but I'm happy to provide that. It's Holly, HOLLY Prebe, last name PRIEBE, dash Diaz at lausd.net.
I'd like to say on November the 13th in Pasadena, we're having the California School Library Association statewide conference. And for the very first time, on the last day of the conference, which is on November the 13th, we're calling it Cyber Sunday. And we're making it free to the public.
Oh, great.
No charge. And we've got some amazing people coming because we know in order to deal with this issue that we're talking about today and more, we can't have a single stakeholder group at the table. We have to have all hands on deck. And we've got such a wonderful lineup of people coming. I won't boast about it now. We really could use a senator from the state of California to come. Anyway, that's on November the 13th, and it's open for the public. And anybody else here is interested in being a part of that, if you've got good minds and good hearts, we'd love to have you come. That's on November the 13th, Pasadena Convention Center.
Information with my office, it sounds very, very interesting. I would like to know more about it. Thank you.
Glad.
Glenn mentioned that event, and I think it's going to be enormously
there.
helpful. And, well, Pasadena, possibly. The only thing I'd add is that Common Sense Media has a lot of resources for parents and schools and a free K-12 curriculum around what we call digital literacy and citizenship. And the best place to find that is on our website, which is commonsense.org/educators. And there are a lot of tools there around privacy and a lot of the issues that we've discussed.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
please join me in thanking this panel for their great participation and their commitment to our children. Thank you all very much for being here today.
Thank you.
We are going to just take a quick 5-minute break to allow the panelists for the next panel to join us here on the stage. So those of you who are part of that panel, please do step up, and we will begin again right about 3 o'clock. Thank you all very much.
This is Senate TV.
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 This is Senate TV. Esta es la televisión del Senado.
This is Senate TV.
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 This is Senate TV. Esta es la televisión del Senado.
This is Senate TV.
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 All right. Thank you, everybody, for assembling and be ready to go at 3 o'clock. We're just about on time. And thank you to another wonderful panel of experts who've taken the time to be here with us today to share your information and expertise to make sure that not only our children are safe, but adults on the internet as well. So thank you for that. Let me introduce this panel. They are here to speak about the dangers of disclosing too much information publicly. How do criminals use the internet? How do stalkers and financial scam artists use the internet? How are bullies using the internet? And what are the latest trends? We will be hearing this afternoon from Sergeant Rolando Bracamontes, who is with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and he's part of the Southern California High-Tech Crimes and Internet. He looks at Southern California high-tech crimes and internet privacy crimes. Sergeant Richard Ruiz with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Special Victims Unit. Detective Jose Viramontes with the Los Angeles Police Department. And Jonathan Fairlow with the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. He is the Assistant Head Deputy of the High-Tech Crime Division. Thank you very much for being here, and I will begin with a few questions, and please feel free to jump in, whoever is interested in answering. So why don't we just start with, what are the dangers of disclosing too much information online in places like Facebook or Twitter or any of the other possibilities?
Anybody care to elaborate?
Well, I'd like to start. I'd like to open by saying that a lot of the times, some of the dangers are unknown to the victim when they first post the information. And when it's first posted, it's not until that affects them that they realize, gosh, I shouldn't have done that. So number one, education is important. Some of the dangers that we're seeing is people put more than normal personal information. First and last name, town where they live, and friends' names along with family members' names. If you go to websites like Zabasearch, Veromi, Pipple.com, and many, many other websites that are people locators, you will find that if somebody has an obsession or fixation with you, it's so easy to find not only you, your brothers, your fathers, family members, relatives, and so on and so forth. So your anonymity, your privacy is completely gone. And it's not until they have that person who has that fixation, that abnormal fixation, that they become aware, gosh, maybe I shouldn't have posted my sister's address, and maybe I shouldn't have posted that we're having a party at her house, because now the weirdo is at the front door hiding in the bushes, and that's when the police department's called, and we get to act on that.
As we all know, the social networking sites are now the new meeting grounds for adults. Unfortunately, they're the meeting grounds for children. A lot of these kids are very comfortable getting on the internet and pretty much giving out a lot of information about themselves, putting pictures out there. A lot of these kids are spending a lot of time on that internet, Facebook, MySpace, and not thinking about who's watching, literally the world.
Sheriff Baca pointed out a little bit of statistics that we recorded last year, 6,000 identity theft reports that were reported to the sheriff's department. That was in, last year. Prior to that, I think it was 7,000. So we've seen a little bit of a decrease. Nevertheless, identity theft is the #2 cybercrime in the United States. And one of the things that as an identity theft, what I would do is go to these social networking sites and look to see what I can find out, if I can cultivate some victims from the social networking sites. And you'd be surprised, using the resources that my colleague just outlined, along with some of the social networking sites, even paying a little bit of money, $10, for some open source information, you'd be surprised at what you can come up with. And so it is critical to understand the consequences with putting too much information out there about not only yourself but of your family as well, and not just in your application or on your what they call on your wall, but even in the content of your discussions with your friends. I think that's also critical. Do not disclose as much information. Just because you're speaking to your friend in an open forum, you have to understand that you may not know who else is watching and listening to what it is that you're, typing, that is.
I have a question kind of generally. Does anyone here carry cash anymore, beyond the odd maybe $20 or $40? So what do our criminals focus on? Things of value to steal or to leverage? And quite frankly, we don't keep cash anymore. What we keep and what we value is information. And information and the act of profiling it, of gathering it, has become the new holy grail of the criminal element. Information has value in multiple different ways. I can use it to obtain credit, which are all things that we're pretty comfortable with. We all know the general types of ID theft. But I can also use it to blackmail you. I can also use it to target your business. And perhaps most importantly, I can use it to gain an advantage in regular day-to-day activities. Something as simple as identifying an individual at a company that we're engaged in a negotiation with, targeting that individual on Facebook, gathering information about them, and then using information about their high school class to contact them as an old classmate, and to do a SQL injection onto the site to gain access to the email servers and other information for the victim company to know the discussions going on in the negotiations. There are a myriad of ways that information can have value, and anytime information is presented open, unprotected, and available for all, it can be profiled, collected, and used against.
So why don't we talk for a little bit about what sorts of bits of information should people be especially careful about not sharing on the internet? One thing that I have been amazed at is observing individuals who might be at the shopping mall or the baseball game, and there's a table where you can sign up for something for free, whatever it is, like a travel bag or whatever. And the person with that little postcard that you're going to fill out is asking for some information that is likely not in your best interest to put on the internet so it can be aggregated. But why don't we talk about that for a moment? What types of specific information do you think are particularly, people should be very careful about not putting in places where it might be shared?
I'd like to address that for a bit. How many of you guys know anybody who's ever won that car that's sitting in the middle of the mall when you fill out that application? Has anybody ever met anybody who's officially No, I haven't. One. Everybody else on this internet forum viewing this, I think we have one. All right. It's important to understand how these companies or how these resources obtain our information. Sometimes is inadvertently. How many of you guys go out and fill out that Ralph's discount card or CVS discount card, right? We disclose information. We don't know that they turn around to a marketing company and resell your information over and over and over again. Providing bigger information collection internet companies to collect that information and store it in a database, where now as a consumer you can go and buy that information. That's how we inadvertently give our information out. They have our home address, our age, how much we make a year, our closest relative, husbands, whatever, and most specifically, our email address, where they start to target you sometimes with the advertisements. But anybody paying a small fee can obtain that information. And we just inadvertently gave the whole world basic information that identifies us. And here's another problem that we have when we talk about stalking. Sometimes at the Threat Management Unit, we deal with celebrity stalkers. We dealt with a case where a celebrity, Shawn Johnson, she's a gymnast, a guy came over from Florida to stalk her. And during the actual trial, this guy had Googled her. She literally posted on, while this case is, the trial's going on, she posted, "Love going to Theodore's, my favorite shopping store. My agent and my mom took me there this afternoon." Well, society's learning from that. Kids are posting that information real time. Little do they know that Shawn Johnson, the celebrity, wasn't really at Theodore's. She's being paid by these companies to post that information. But it's a trend, it's a catch. So now we have juveniles, people of the general public posting, "Oh, I just had coffee at Denny's," or "I just had, They do that inadvertently. Little do they know that these big name people and celebrities are actually being paid hundreds and thousands of dollars to do this.
I do a lot of internet safety presentations to PTA groups, to kids, and the number one thing I tell the kids and the parents is basically pictures, pictures, pictures. Everything they post on that internet site that they're in is going to be looked at by the world. If there's a sexual predator out there looking around and he sees a child in front of a school, and the child puts down there that they're 10, 12 years old, if this person wants to target that child, they're going to find them. If that child's name is Jasmine and they're in front of Washington Elementary School, they will find that child. So one of the things I tell a lot of the parents and the kids is watch what you post on the internet, especially pictures.
Any other thoughts on that?
Some of our best investigative resources, investigative tours are found on the internet, utilizing some of the same resources that these criminals are using or some of the resources that we use as well. And unfortunately, he's right. The more information you post out there, the more available it is to not only to the good people, but to the bad people. Unfortunately, once you hit send, once you publish that information, there is no recall button. There is no way to get it back. Now, on top of that, you have absolutely no control over what is done with it thereafter. Whether it goes to a marketing company, whether it goes to the East Coast, you have absolutely no control. And it's critical. It's critical to know that before you actually post something, know what the ramifications are going to be, and know that you have no control over that information anymore.
The area that I like to talk to people about with internet safety is I don't believe it is possible to not provide information or to hide yourself effectively anymore. I know of very few people who have managed it, and the work and effort it requires is almost akin to being a Luddite. So what I focus on is, what is your unique information? If your name is James Smith, I'm not so much worried about your name. Nor am I worried about your email address, jamessmith23@yahoo.com. However, if you have a unique last name, if you have a phone number that is not listed, if you've got information that is personal to you and is relatively unique, that is easy to find in an internet search, that's the information you need to watch more closely, because that is the piece of data that can help find you among the herd of other people whose data is out there.
I have a question with regard to how police reports might be written in the event that you're investigating a case that has some connection or link to the internet. When I was working on the legislation with Sheriff Baca, what I found was, although I had lots and lots of stories and had heard about many serious cases, it was very hard to do actual data searches to find these actual situations, these incidents. Are police reports, have they caught up with the technology in a way that there is some reference that the internet is involved in a particular case that you're investigating, so that it is possible to aggregate information about what sort of crimes are happening that have some, reference or help with, the internet is somehow connected in the element of that crime.
Well, I think that you're going to find that each agency has its own police report. However, since most agencies are going to do reporting to the FBI, the standards set by the FBI tend to become the de facto segregation data silos, so to speak, to help identify police report information. So if you are looking for a method to get more discrete data about different types of crime, it is the reporting standards set up by the FBI for national databases that I think are going to be the most effective method for standardization. Otherwise, it's really up to each department based upon how it wishes to evaluate the criteria. The other factor is you could look at crime types, but I don't think that's particularly effective because of the fact that I can use the internet to commit or be involved with or support almost any type of crime. And merely looking at identity thefts or computer intrusions or 528.5s is only going to give you a narrow slice.
That's what I found in my research. So you as practitioners, do you have any suggestions on how one would be able to maybe change reporting practices that would allow people to see what sort of trends we have in certain types of crimes that are impacted by the internet? Obviously, we all know that identity theft is a big one. The internet's often used for that, but it's not always easy to go back, and you might find an identity theft case, but it might not have that hook of the internet was used to do this, that, and that in this case. Do you have any thoughts on that?
In the Sheriff's Department, we have what is known as statistical codes. The unfortunate thing is a lot of these crimes are multiple. A lot of times we might have a crime involving a child. At the same time, we'll have a crime involving hacking. And within our own department, Special Victims Bureau handles the crimes against children. If there's a hacking case, I'll pass it over to Rolando, and his group will handle the hacking part of it. So yes, is it evolving? Yes, it is. We're constantly changing our stat codes to meet the current demand of what's going on within the internet.
This very subject is actually something we've been discussing over the past week, and we are in the process of evolving and changing policy and establishing some sort of method to be able to capture more than just, the identity theft statute, but maybe some of the more intricacies that are involved in the particular cases, or more of the types of cyber crimes that are involved with any one particular, identity theft, or as my colleague said, a 528.5, false impersonation of another using the internet.
I think a better data source for you might be the actual internet service providers themselves with the number of subpoenas that they respond to. Because I think that going to each and every department, or even trying to set up a code method, runs into several practical problems. The first is that, again, in a police report that's becoming more and more checkbox focused with a lot of different information, it's easy for a checkbox to be left off. And if it doesn't have a direct correlation either with the assignment of the case or a charging structure, it's work that might not necessarily get focused or done. The second issue is, now that it's becoming so common for internet information to be available, many of the requests are made just at the station detective level to gather information. So absent some way to collate or collect the information being gathered at each department, I think that's a very difficult task to try and get from the departments themselves.
Obviously, the types of crimes have been evolving over time with the internet too. So how have internet crimes changed, say, maybe over the last 5 years? What are the trends we're seeing? And any thoughts on growth in certain types of crimes as a result of the internet? What sort of crimes are most prevalent using the internet?
Well, I've been prosecuting these cases for about 11 years. And when I started, ID theft was the big thing, and most of it was good old-fashioned stuffing and jogging, people going along and stealing your mail and filling out those pre-approved credit apps. What I have noticed is that electronic crime is like water. As soon as an area is patched or blocked, it moves directly to the next area where there is value. And part of the reason why I'm still doing this particular job, why I love it so much, is every day I'll get a phone call that pretty much ends up with the tagline, "Is this a crime?" And then we have to figure out how it applies and what it works. The two big changes that I have seen are now there's been a shift from specific computer-based crimes into mobile-based crimes. Everything is based off the cell phone or the internet access that is mobile. And because of that, what we're seeing is more crimes that are targeted to the general use, when someone is out at a mall, at a location, and they're hacking, picking up information, stealing data. The goal is to hide the points at which police can trace or investigate back. And picking up information that is generally available on a mobile site really aids to that. The other area that we've seen is a focus on the use of information, so that information is taken in one location, skimmed maybe in Phoenix, stolen in Chicago, and then used in California. We are seeing that criminals have really picked up on jurisdiction and on the fact that we're still using rules from, the Middle Ages, effectively, in terms of figuring out who's responsible for what, and they're taking advantage of how we work.
Another thing that we find is, how many of you guys have actually Googled your name? Yeah, quite a few of you. How many of you actually Googled your home address? There's a picture of my wife watering our lawn when I Google my home address and go to Google Earth. So back when the stalkers and burglars used to prepare to go to your house, there was a casing period. They used to watch you for a while. They used to they sit back in the car, sit nice and low profile, and sometimes they were seen, sometimes not. Now that preparation period is overlapped. It's skipped completely. Now they can go on Google Earth and get a frontal view of your house. Do you have a gate? Do you have a fence? Do you have a dog? Do you have a gardener? Do you have an alarm system? They can key in on that, so now they become more effective in intruding into your personal life and your personal space. If there's no car, some of these pictures are older, some of the Google Earth pictures are older, but still pretty consistent. Google your address today. Go home, Google it, and see how current that picture of your front house is. It may be a slightly different color, but I guarantee you that fence might not be there, or that picture of the fountain in the front yard might still be there. It might be current. So it's kind of scary now how that step has been now literally skipped by some of the criminals.
I do the same thing. I Google my name. I Google my children's names. And if you haven't done that, do so. If you haven't heard of Google Alerts, utilize that tool and put your children's and your family's names in there. And so if anything pops up on the internet related to their names or whatever it is that criteria you enter there, you'll get an email alert indicating, and then you can go directly to whatever that link is. It's a good tool. I use it. I've used it to search for criminals, and a lot of my colleagues do that as well too, to see what they're doing online. Other things that, I have a list of things here that what the criminals are doing, what the trends are with respect to the internet and mobile internet, and surveillance is one of them. You no longer have to drive out there in front of a house and case your victims. They utilize the social networking sites too as a surveillance platform. They also do, well, about a month ago, we received a report of what we call a 528.5, where somebody created a fictitious Facebook social networking site in another person's name. The 12-year-old minor who was the victim has had no idea. And to this date, we're not sure what the motivation was on the perpetrator who was doing this from another county. But they're doing these sort of things, and I suspect that he was probably doing this to lure friends and family members of that minor. They utilize the internet for fraud, for phishing, to exploit children, also to do some homework for unlawful intrusions, hacking as we've been calling it. Copyright infringement, it's a big one. Music, it's unfortunately a lot of our children are very much aware of how easy it is to go online and pull down music. And it is so simple to do, but it doesn't make it right. We talked about bullying, stalking. Bullying can evolve into stalking. So all of the crimes that we normally investigated, 10, 15 years ago, or have evolved with a cyber nexus to it now, and as a result, the California Penal Code system is ever evolving, and it goes back to your last question: is how do we keep up with that? It is so rapidly evolving. I don't know, Jonathan, do you have anything else to add?
The biggest thing that I am seeing is that any type of crime that currently exists can, with some very few exceptions, become a digital crime. It's still the same crimes. It's still theft. It's still vandalism. It's still extortion, conspiracy. It just has a new venue. And the biggest issues that we are seeing is whether or not our laws, our ability to access information has kept up with that to be able to reflect the new types of crimes.
We've been noticing that in Sacramento as well. So if you have any thoughts, please share them with us. Are there any particular criminal trends when it comes to social networking websites that you see that you could share with us?
As it relates to children, the biggest trend that we're seeing is, I think I heard it earlier, sextortion. We recently finished a case involving 20 victims at a local high school. Our suspect turned out to be 16 years of age. He was getting on Facebook and basically pretending to be, our victims were all female. He was claiming to be their friends and convincing them to send nude photos of themselves to who they thought were their friends. The case was presented over to the district attorney's office, and we're pursuing cases like these as extortion. And I'll let Jonathan talk about extortion and sextortion, but that's new with the DAs that we're dealing with as well here in LA County.
Oh, wow.
Countywide, one of the things that we're seeing now, and unfortunately we're behind the 8 ball on teaching the rest of law enforcement, and that is what happens when somebody creates a fictitious Facebook account or a fictitious Craigslist ad in another person's name, and it's happening more and more. Unfortunately, this year alone, I think we've recorded 22 instances. 3 of those cases involve minors. And I know it's a relatively new statute, and as law enforcement becomes more and more aware of it and how it is applied, I think the numbers will start to show that it's probably happening more than it's been reported.
Would you say that with regard to children that most of the activities are dealing with teenagers, or do we see younger and younger children? We all know it is against the law for children under 13 to have a social network site, but unfortunately we know that it's not the case, that they're staying off the internet. But maybe you could tell us some trends. Is this a problem with teenagers? Are there younger children? What sort of risks should we be aware of? What sort of cases are you working that you can share with us with regard to children?
Well, first, obviously, with regards to any juvenile case, we have to be very, very circumspect. There's an absolute protection of privacy with regards to it, so we have to talk generically. Sorry, we can't go into particular details. Oh, no, of course.
Yes.
But also trying to explain why we might be a little vague with regards
Yes.
to details rather than giving some specifics.
Mm-hmm.
We have, our division has started to prosecute juveniles for violations of Penal Code Section 528.5 and identity theft involving the use of both Facebook and MySpace. We're only getting started with that to try and get a sense of how these cases work, and there's going to be a lot more work done in the juvenile offices themselves. So I can only speak to the few cases that I myself have dealt with. I can't tell you if these are a trend or if these are just kind of the luck of the draw. But the minors involved in this have been in elementary school or in middle school with regards to most of the behavior. So it is not just limited to what we would normally think of as a teenager, 16, 17. It can go even as young as 12 or 13.
One thing I have noticed is dealing with some celebrity cases, you have obviously younger celebrities, younger singers that come out, and with mainly the teenage crowd, which obviously companies like Disney and other companies like sports companies, target the teenage spectrum of children. What you have is these children creating fake Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook accounts to be target specific. A perfect example is a case we just handled where a young woman, I shouldn't say young woman, I didn't know it at the time, but a victim received, she was an ex-girlfriend of a pop singer, received a threat via a Tumblr account. Tumblr is kind of like Facebook, social media. Well, the threat was very graphic, specific. It said that she was going to be skinned alive, she was going to be killed in her sleep, and she knew, they described details about her house, her residence, her comings and goings, Google, of course. After we wrote a warrant to the Tumblr people, we discovered that it was the actual account that created the Tumblr account came back to something sparkled, something or other. It was a teenage girl who was upset that the pop singer had obtained this girlfriend, who now was angry at the girlfriend, so she targeted her specifically, graphically. So we find that more and more that socially, depending on what the popular trend is with some of these people and some of their actions, the teenage group is more likely to act because that anonymity behind that keyboard, they become brave. They think we're not going to catch them. Fortunately, we had a bit of luck. The other thing that we find is that some of the internet companies that might not be on United States shores, we find it very, very difficult to obtain information from them because they're in Germany, they're in Europe, they're in Paris. What kind of legal binding do we have to get them to cooperate? They laugh us off. So it's very difficult to get speedy resolution to the case.
We just had a suspect out of Israel that we're in the process of extraditing back to the United States involving a Facebook case. It's still in the works, but there's probably over 80 victims throughout the United States. So within the Sheriff's Department, we're part of a lot of task forces, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, the FBI SAFE team. And the reason behind that is, I think somebody mentioned earlier, is a lot of our suspects are out of this county. They're out of this state. They're out of this country. They're all over the world. So we need the collaboration with the FBI to help us look for these people throughout the world.
What type of crime was that?
It was a sextortion case.
Wow. And are you seeing more and more, what I'm really concerned about is young children who really don't understand, the safety threat in being on the internet. Do you see any additional threat or any increasing threats for children that are, 13 and younger, children that are probably not supposed to be on the internet in the first place? Do you see, is that a growing trend or?
Not particularly where the younger generation is not apt. It's more the teeny bop type thing now that they have a love obsession with the star. Not necessarily with the younger crew. We don't see that in our unit anyway as a growing trend. It's more of the mid-teenage, 14, 15, and 16, where you develop crushes on people. And of course, with social media now, you have one person who hits YouTube, and now he's part of Disney's big theme stars, and so easy to get information about them.
So go ahead if you have a comment, and then we're going to close with one last question. What would you like to add?
I think one thing that I would really like to also point out is that the kids who are 12, 13, 14, the behavior tends to be against each other, because it's the stranger danger issue is much less than a concern about someone who doesn't like you in the school because they have the technical capability and they lack the judgment. But I do have one kind of point that I would like to bring out. They're aware of what they're doing. They are fully aware of what the rules are, how to set the privacy settings, how to control it. It's not so much a issue of them understanding the technology or the risks. It's that they lack the wisdom and judgment to understand either the effect of their activities or the empathy in some cases, or in other cases, it's a defense mechanism. If I am the cyber bully, I don't get physically bullied. And part of the problem is that we as older generations don't tend to get the check that goes on in the younger generation and privacy. If you are a 14-year-old, all of your friends are in some way connected online. So if you say something or exaggerate something or talk about something, you're going to get called out online. So in a sense, that online community is a little bit self-verifying as well as self-regulating. And so part of our focus has always been to look at the individual when the identity theft occurs, when someone's identity is taken over, when it is created. Because at that point, that verification breaks down, the ability of other people to comment or deal with the issue breaks down, and it allows someone easy access to a trusted source that can be targeted back to the individual. So I think we also need to look at this not so much as kids that they don't know what's going on. It's that there are other factors involved in triggering them to engage in what in some cases can be criminal behavior.
Right. That's a scary thought. Well, in closing, the last question, knowing what you know because of the sort of cases you've been working on, what sort of advice would you give to parents and children?
Well, I'm first going to start off with what I do at home. First of all, my 11-year-old begs me at least once a week for his Facebook account, and he's not yet reached that level. He's not allowed. My 16-year-old does have a Facebook account. And the warning that I give to my 16-year-old is that beware, and I want to have access to it. So as long as mom and dad have access to it and know what's occurring, I think that kind of gives him a little peace of mind, but it also lets him understand that there is overwatch. And it doesn't matter whether you're 16 or 17. We as parents have a great responsibility. We as law enforcement, we as educators, we as government have responsibility to our children. And we have to explain to them, if it isn't one-on-one in an open forum, of what the problems are, what the threats are with exposing too much of yourself on the internet. With respect to at least what I do on my side of the shop, you don't venture out into the internet without protection. You don't venture out on the internet without antivirus. You don't venture out on the internet without anti-spam. You don't venture out on the internet without knowing much about the internet. We don't walk down into a dark alley in a crime-infested neighborhood in the middle of the night. You don't do that in the internet either. And that's one of the things that I try to tell people is that just because you have a computer, that you don't venture out without knowing what this stuff is all about. And you don't venture out there without protecting yourself and ensuring that you have safeguards, not only safeguards by not putting out too much information about yourself, but also something to protect your computer, something to protect you from viruses and hackers, which are prolific. They're out there. Those are some of the most common bits of advice that I give. Probably on a daily basis, I get phone calls every day about that sort, especially because of what we do in our side of the shop.
Thank you very much. Any other advice?
Following back on what Rolando just said, I do a lot of presentations, again, to PTA groups, to kids. The number one response I get from parents is, I don't know anything about Facebook. I don't know anything about computers. And my response is typically, please learn, okay? Sit there with your child, learn their passwords, ask them what they're doing on the internet, because if you don't, somebody else will. Okay, somebody else is gonna talk to them on the internet, and it might be that predator that's out there.
Thank you.
I think back then, if we go back 20, 30 years, if you see some of the old television shows, Leave It to Beaver, so on and so forth, the biggest concern is, do you have a hat on? It's cold outside. You have $1 to buy some food or some milk for cookies, yeah. Nowadays, I think it's the parent's responsibility to be more vigilant. And like it's been said, learn more about this. It's not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna grow. And it's growing at a rate we're not able to control. Law enforcement can't control it, educators can't control it, the public can't control it. So I believe, and in my strong opinion, I think that some of these websites that afford us this access should be more responsible in providing some type of public service announcement and making sure that before you click that agree and read that agreement affidavit that nobody really reads, you just click agree and it's gone. They should be forced to watch a video, something that makes them more responsible. We know the parents probably will never watch it. It's that teenager that needs to know the repercussions of putting too much information out, that giving their personal information to somebody that shouldn't have it, or a picture, what the repercussions of it are. And maybe law enforcement should start a small education when they meet people, such as PTA groups and forums like this is great. Let's make the websites responsible, just like we held the cigarettes companies responsible for all the damage they've caused throughout this. It's put back on the public. Now you know the dangers. What are you going to do about it now? The websites also have a responsibility to keep us safe. They're making millions of dollars on their behalf. Invest that back into the community and into the forums.
Thank you very much. Very well said. Yes.
You know, I have to say that while I certainly respected that idea, that's one area where I absolutely disagree, because I've had cases where we've had we've notified 300,000 people of potential data breaches, and 6 people bothered to respond. I think we have too many notices. I think we have so many going off in so many different ways. We tune them out, like those data breach notices we all get for every time someone's accessed our card, etc. Anyone do anything with those? Anyone follow them up? No, they become like cry wolf. My approach that I have seen to work effectively is education coupled with targeted at the right point in time. My son recently, as part of his ethics classes and his civics classes in 5th grade, the first thing that was done was cyberbullying, cyber etiquette, and how to approach and deal with others. The educational component at the school that is not only brought into the students as well as brought into the parents by focusing on not just rights but responsibilities. Guess what? As a parent, if you don't watch what your kid does online, you're liable. Whether you knew or not, whether you bothered to read the manual, whether you bothered to understand the technology or not. You can't just hand a 16-year-old keys to the car and say, son, go have fun, figure it out. You have to know. So it is the parent's responsibility. I don't believe it's the website's responsibility. I think that they can certainly be helpful. I think they can certainly assist in the information package, but ultimately it comes down to personal responsibility as well as a targeted educational approach to make sure that kids understand. And one of the things that I loved about the last panel was not only all the things that are bad about the internet, but what the wonderful capabilities are and how this wonderful gift can benefit you or it can really put you in trouble. Your call.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
We can agree to disagree that the websites do not have liability or responsibility to be the advocates to their own demise. But if you do have a problem, and the Twitter stage, the Facebook stage, they will acknowledge responsibility for somebody acting irresponsibly on their website. You can contact Facebook and Twitter and say, hey, you know what, the guy bearing this handle or this URL is doing X, Y, B, and Z type of activity. They will send them a message saying, hey, behave. That's how they recognize the liability, because they want to stop it. Lawsuits are rampant in the internet age. The last thing they want is another lawsuit across their desk. So they are accepting some responsibility in stopping that behavior.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions for this panel from the audience? Please come forward. There's a microphone right over here to your right. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Are there any other questions for this panel?
Thank you.
Please.
Okay. My question is, I am especially interested in issues regarding human trafficking. So I would like to know if you have identified any criminals or traffickers that have used online access to promote the crime.
There's numerous organizations here in Los Angeles County. We have ICANN that has a subgroup that's specifically dealing with the issue of human trafficking here in Los Angeles County. There's various throughout the state of California. If you need, I'll give you my business card afterwards and I can give you the information. I belong to a few of them myself on human trafficking involving kids.
Thank you very much for the question. We have one more question.
First of all, thank you very much for this great panel. Really appreciate it. When it comes to, and the cyber tip line, cyber tip crime line for FBI, yeah. The information, sharing of information, schools are confused about where policy of the school, and hey, Johnny, I don't know why you pick on Johnny. Johnny, now tell us if you did it. Do the right thing. And then Johnny tells the right thing and we have school discipline. But when a law enforcement officer is in the room, Johnny tells, and the Miranda rights aren't read. I mean, just this summer, that was a Supreme Court reversal of lower courts. And the reason I bring that up is the question is, it's confusing for school staff where the legal lines are. It is also confusing for law enforcement. We had a assistant principal 4 years ago who picked up a phone with child sexting on it, reported it to the police, told the parents, and the assistant principal was arrested because he was in possession of child porn. And he was trying to take care of the kid. So the question is, what are we doing from law enforcement to the school to make sure that we're not blurring those lines and we have some sort of competence of how to proceed without, having to come back in our face? I guess it's law enforcement education to the schools.
Does one answer?
That's an excellent question. It's also an area where I think that the legislature can have a meaningful impact. I think one of the first areas that we need to decide is the jurisdiction of a school for activities that are directed against students in the school, but also let's not forget another category who gets bullied, teachers. When there is an assault on a teacher, when there is an attack on a teacher's reputation, at what point does the school have some level of responsibility or jurisdiction? And those are going to be, I think, two separate approaches. The second area is to talk about what, and this is the hardest line to cross, what crosses from being a appropriate school-based disciplinary action into something that results in a crime. Well, there, I think what we look at is we already have 528.5 and we have the identity theft statute. So clearly when you have the taking over of an identity, you've got a clear criminal act. But what about when the bullying or the harassment is done in the person's own name? Well, then I think we start running into First Amendment issues. And those issues can provide a pretty good guidepost for us as to when it's appropriate to deal with at the school level and when it might be criminal. I hesitate to provide clear guidelines because I think that we're going to need to resolve this issue with some cases over a period of time. But I also think that the courts are pretty aware of that. There was a recent case involving a potential terrorist threat at a school. Went all the way up to the California Supreme Court, and they ultimately concluded that it wasn't a terrorist threat. They then spent the rest of the opinion telling the school and the police they did exactly the right thing. They investigated it, they checked in it. It was far better for them to be wrong about what was a terrorist threat than to potentially have the harm or some of the issues coming about. There isn't a bright line rule, but I do think this is an area where in the education code, with a clear definition of responsibilities for the school, can really clarify this particular issue.
Thank you very much. I would also encourage all of you, if you do have any thoughts, ideas for things that we should be looking at legislatively with regard to this subject, I would be very, very interested in continuing that discussion. So thank you very much for spending your time with us today. Let's thank the panelists of this very important panel. Thank you very much. Our next panel is starting in about 2 minutes, so if you could please come on forward. Thank you very much.
This is Senate TV.
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 This is Senate TV. Esta es la televisión del Senado.
This is Senate TV.
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 This is Senate TV. Esta es la televisión del Senado.
This is Senate TV.
We're here to start the third panel, and I will introduce the esteemed members of the panel, and they will be speaking about what should people be doing to protect themselves, what are the industry trends as it relates to privacy and information disclosure on the internet, and what should consumers and parents watch out for, and what should they be doing to protect their children. We're very happy to have with us Michelle Dennedy, who's a privacy officer for McAfee Incorporated and founder of the Identity Project. John Simpson with Consumer Watchdog, he's a consumer advocate. And Tracy Webb, who's a senior trial deputy, Los Angeles City Attorney's Office on cybercrime and child abuse in the Cybercrime and Child Abuse Prevention Division on Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I should have just said the ICAC. Thank you so much for being with us. And once again, we will have a series of questions for you to respond to. Please feel free, who would ever like to answer the questions that are posed. So let's just start out with, is the internet industry doing enough to protect the safety and privacy of people and their children? Start.
No, definitely not. I mean, ultimately, a lot of it comes back to parents and how they interact with your children and how they set the right sort of standards. But industry has an obligation, it seems to me, to provide necessary tools to be able to do things. And one of the big problems right now is default settings. So much of the default settings in the various websites are set so that things are automatically shared with the full public. And my view, we run our privacy project at Consumer Watchdog, is that the default should be for minimal sharing of most information that you yourself are posting. And then when you learn more about it, you can affirmatively make changes to share more broadly. That tends not to be the case right now. I just went on to Facebook and created a new account since they've done some changes and tried to see how easy it is to follow. And indeed, it's more granular, but if anything, that makes it more complex. And it is by default to share with the public. So that's a problem. That whole area that I'm talking about now is the area that governs things that people themselves make a conscious decision to share. There's a whole other area which is equally troublesome, some would say perhaps more troublesome, which is the sort of constant tracking of individuals' behavior when they go online. And most people just don't understand the extent that happens. You go onto a website, they put down a cookie, and the marketing company follows you everywhere and knows everything that you do, and this information can be compiled with offline databases to really probably do some very harmful, hurtful things. There needs to be a way to return to consumers the right to have control over their own online data, and that falls into the area of so-called do not track legislation or do not track mechanism, which some of the browsers have stepped up and tried to do. But as a whole, I think the industry has not lived up to the necessary responsibilities, and I've only started to respond in a limited way because attention is being put on them, sometimes by legislation that doesn't necessarily make it all the way through, but in fact puts a spotlight on the issue.
We haven't given up yet, though, I just want you to know.
Good.
So, any other thoughts on that question? Yes.
So I think I want to paint the other side of the glass. So the glass is half empty, but it's also half full. So when I first became a chief privacy officer over 10 years ago, there probably were about 20 of us worldwide. And now today there's over 30,000 people that at least, have that as their title, whether, they're given the right authority within their corporate structures or not, is growing. So I think there is certainly a lot of corporate interest in putting together the right controls and protections. The other side of that is how free do we want the internet to be? Monetarily free, informationally free. And I think there's a balance at play. Behavioral targeting comprises about 5% of marketing today. 95% is display ads that are relatively anonymous. I'm not advocating that that's a great thing, but it certainly is something that's worth taking a look at and saying, you know, there has been actually a great deal of organizational progress along these lines. I think we sometimes over-rotate and say that Facebook has subsumed the world, when in fact most businesses are in a very different place than that particular business is.
Are you seeing any particular trends with regard to privacy that the industry is getting involved in?
I think there's more and more dialogue in making real privacy information accessible. So we were actually talking before the panel began. I can't write a privacy policy for consumers anymore. I'm legislatively banned from doing so if I want to still stay employed by my company and act as a fiduciary to my shareholders. The privacy policies have become a compliance mechanism, so they are very long, they're very complicated. If you're a multinational, you're forced to put in all sorts of information from around the world. So what we need to do, and what I think there has been a good trend in doing, is finding more mechanisms to do just-in-time education, looking to newer technologies like YouTube, for example, to educate people, do a Khan Academy type style of education about what is security, what's an IP address, does anyone even really know? Before we ban it and say that it's a bad thing, let's find out what it is and what we can do. If you can knock off the last octet, for example, it makes a big difference. So knowing what this technology is, and I think that's the biggest and most positive trend in the industry right now, is there is a hunger to actually educate meaningful choice for our consumers so that they actually can engage in our products more meaningfully.
And do you think, and this wasn't one of the questions that was posed earlier, but do you think there is a trend that consumers are looking for products that involve more privacy? Do you see that?
I don't. And that is the shameful thing. And so every time I go to a forum like this, so I'm split brain. So my identity management identity project side is my parent side. My McAfee side, I've actually joined a company that's all about family protection. That's the reason I joined the company in the first place. But I'm a corporate player at the same time. I wish I would get more emails or interactions or thank you letters from consumers saying, hey, saw your information, thank you for engaging us. I spent 10 years at Sun Microsystems. Our entire platform was to protect privacy and security. We went out of business, we were bought. So I wish I could see more consumers saying there actually is a better technological choice, there's a clearer protection choice, but unfortunately, mostly we're going for a cheaper choice. And the cheaper choice involves this push towards behavioral marketing more and more and more, thirst for information. So it's a push me, pull me. And so when consumers do like what they see, when they are educated, when they do feel like a company's doing well with privacy and security, it would be very helpful for the hapless CPOs of the world if we got a note. I could take that to my CEO and get more budget to do what we do instead of being viewed as a cost center.
I wonder, though, whether if, I know obviously that products are provided because people have interest in them, but I wonder if, various different improved privacy types of opportunities were there, whether consumers would actually migrate towards that. Any thoughts on that?
I would love to see that be the trend. It hasn't been traditionally over the last 15 years. There are some sparks of that where it's a flagrant abuse situation, but even where we find out that there's a major security hole, unfortunately, we find that people will go to the pop sites or the cheap sites, and we're not really seeing that trend that you'd like to see. I'd like to see Mozilla being one of the biggest browsing companies in the world. They're not. It's still an open source, rather small project, and part of that is because we are seeing consumers who want to go to the more popularized browsers that are attached to more and more applications. So it's a matter of convenience, it's a matter of price, and it's a matter of trend. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that trend towards privacy and security really becoming a consumer issue. It certainly is from the inside out, from the advocacy issue, but I'd love to see the consumers really start to exercise their voices.
I'm obviously hearing from different people than you're hearing from.
Can I respond to
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Minority.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Other comments?
Obviously, I come from the perspective of a prosecutor. So I'm prosecuting technology-facilitated crimes against children every single day, like Jonathan is. But at the same time, I'm also doing many presentations to very large groups of people all over the county, all over the state, all over the country. And these are usually very large groups of either educators or parents who are really hungering, almost desperate for this information. And I never do a presentation where somebody doesn't say, oh my gosh, you've just overwhelmed me with all of these words, geotagging and sextortion and Formspring and Foursquare. I don't even know what you're talking about. But I'm desperate for help, for information. Where do I go? Where do I get resources? Where do I get help? Where do I protect myself, short of locking up my children in my computer forever? And so it's kind of an interesting perspective as far as what the trends are concerned, because that's kind of where the victims who I deal with every day and their families are desperate for information. And one of the things that I do, I co-chair the LA County Cybercrime Task Force for ICANN, and that's not only law enforcement folks, but also industry people from social networking sites and from many of the movie companies and television companies. And so there's kind of it takes a village mentality with all of us to sort of throw all our hats in the ring and see what we can do as far as protecting children and protecting privacy and things like that. So I think sort of the desire is there on our part, and the knowledge is certainly there on our part, but it's the laws are behind we're kind of behind the 8 ball as far as keeping up with the technology.
It's kind of interesting. It might just be hearing this discussion that people are looking more to their, law enforcement folks and their legislators to pass on their concerns, as opposed to looking to industry as the person to, say, could you change this? They're looking to us instead. That may just well be how people are communicating.
That's part of it. We have a program that we call the Cyber Mom Blogger at McAfee, and so you can go to McAfee.com/family, and we have checklists. It's not just about our family of protection products, but it's also about checklists, what parents can do, the questions you can ask, what should you be looking for in a social networking site, how can you protect yourself? And it's along the line also of my website, which is theidentityproject.com, which is tips for parents, real life, easy to read kind of consumer tips for, as an insider, I realize there's so much jargon, and we assume we're so saturated in technology. I live in Silicon Valley, and we're just saturated with technology. We assume everybody else knows what we're talking about. It's simply not true.
That's a key part of the issue, I think. And also, your company essentially is in the business of providing security. And I mean, I think when we're talking about some of the other companies, I mean, if you're talking about a Google, if you're talking about a Facebook, that's where, that's an entirely different problem. I mean, in some sense, your company is really a privacy advocate.
Absolutely.
And security advocate.
We'd like to have as many users as Google, but we don't.
Yeah, so I mean, when I'm making my critique here, I'm shooting it out usually at Google, because they're the big dog on the internet, and if we can get them to do the right thing, maybe other internet providers will, and so on. But for instance, you like Mozilla, they were the first to put in an option that offers a do not track mechanism. Safari, which is Apple's entrant, and did the same thing. Microsoft now offers it too. Guess which browser doesn't? Google's Chrome. And I think that says a lot about where they are in wanting to track people around the internet. So I think it's partly an educational issue. All of our polling has found, for instance, 90% support for increased privacy legislation.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the problem is that people just don't understand what the sort of standard industry practices are.
Yeah, that could well be. So what should people know about the internet? How can they protect their privacy? Is this regulation? Is this something industry should be involved in on their own? And, should we have different rules and regulations with regard to children? Any thoughts on those questions?
So I'm going to be very, very specific on one certain thing. So just to tell my own story. So I've been in this business for 12 years, And last January, I went out on my own to do a little consulting company, and the first company that approached me had been working with Carnegie Mellon doing a study on child ID theft. And so I tried their service just to see what it was like, and lo and behold, my now 10-year-old had been the victim of identity theft twice. I'm in the business. I'm a paranoid freak. My child was impacted, not once, but twice. The first time that, and she has a code name online, it's Miss Thang. So Miss Thang had her Social Security number was first in use 11 years before her birth. She was issued a financial birth defect. So she was issued a number that was already in use, and I found out subsequently that this happens about 2%. Not a huge number, but a large number of children are issued a Social Security number that's already been in use. The second time was somebody who had entered the country illegally needed to have utilities to rent an apartment. And so this person, I won't call him a gentleman, took my daughter's identity, probably bought it online, we're not really sure, and opened up an account. You can't exist in the United States without a Social Security number. And the unfortunate thing is, for our children, if you steal them when the children are very young, they won't find out for many years. So you can live under the covers for a long time. So this is when I teamed up, this company is called All Clear ID, and we convinced the CEO, he was going to do it for a trial period, but he's doing it forever now, to do a free scan on every child in America under the age of 18. You go to All Clear ID, and what they do is they'll set a baseline. So you can find out if your child has been victimized to date, as mine has, and then he will clean it up for free. And then for anyone else, if you don't want to pay for his paid service, because it is a business, he will do a free repair for any child in America for free. Because he and I share a belief that it is the credit agency's job to be authenticating credentials before they offer free credit. It is the merchant's job to do a better job with authentication. It's the Social Security Administration's job to not issue dirty credit and dirty Social Security numbers. What it shouldn't be is a child's responsibility to pay to repair their own identity when they haven't gone on Facebook and given too much information away. So I think that's one of the things, and it's available on an app. So they actually just launched an app this week, All Clear ID. So it's a free app. So I think that it excites me so much to see one company doing that, and what I hope to do is to kind of get the agencies in on this, get the other identity protection companies in on this as well, and so people will start to be more aware, particularly for the child ID theft. To me, it's just it's an absolute crime to see someone who's turned away from a job because they can't pass a background check, or they lose out on their student loans because their credit has been destroyed. And I'm seeing cases of this all over the country. And it's absolutely a national emergency in my mind. We can't have 10% of our population every year having a false credential.
What does the repair consist of?
Unfortunately, it's a letter writing campaign. So it's helping people write credit agencies, sometimes dealing with law enforcement, because the parent actually, I still have never seen the record of the two perpetrators against my daughter. That went to law enforcement. Because there's privacy rights, I can't, and I probably shouldn't, because I was ready to get a Louisville Slugger and kiss my girls goodbye for 5 years and take care of the problem myself. So it's a good policy that parents don't have a lot of this information. But going to the credit agencies, and unfortunately, the solution is you have to create a file with credit agencies that should not have a file until your child is 18. So now with my older daughter, I'm going to have to check that file until she comes of age, which I shouldn't have to do. My 5-year-old is clean so far, so I'll check her once a year. But I think, and this is why I've kind of gone on this crusade, no one will make money by solving identity theft. That's the unfortunate thing. And so I think it's all of our rights, it's all of our responsibility to just be very vocal on this issue and to go into the schools and train on this issue and on all the issues that we've talked about this afternoon, how to stay safe online. But even if you've done all the cyber stuff, remember that where our children hang out are the least protected enclaves, schools, churches, scouting. None of these people have a big cyber budget. They're using the lowest level of technology to protect themselves.
So, but I still would like to hear what thoughts you might have on, any regulations we should be looking at to protect folks, and whether there should be different rules or more rules to protect children specifically. What do you think?
Well, the Children's Online Privacy COPPA Act was what, done back before the internet even existed. And so it is pretty much out of date when it comes to various things like the World Wide Web, like mobile applications and all of that. But it at least offered a provision for the Federal Trade Commission to update the act and the regulations. And the FTC has just done that. And they have a pretty good set of revisions that apply quite well, I think, to children under 13, who are definitely in a special kind of category. Where I think there is a lot of problems and where we got to do a lot of work and a lot of education and a lot of thinking is what rules you need to apply to teenagers, because they have curiosity, they want to go where they want to go. You have to sort of let them get out of the nest and fly a little bit, but you've got to be there to catch them. And how that all works and how you all balance some of that with First Amendment issues, for instance, gets very complex. And I'm not sure that you can do as much with the teens with pure regulation as you can with educational processes and with leaning on some of the internet companies to sort of make, when it comes to sharing and that kind of thing, that needs to be, you have to deal with the default like your bill did. I think that's a very important step. I think another tool that the industry itself is trying to, in some places, come up with is the whole do not track movement. And there is some self-regulation attempts by the Digital Advertising Alliance in that. I'm skeptical of them. I personally think we'll ultimately need do not track legislation, and that is something that would be a tool not just for teenagers, but it would be for everyone on the internet. And there also seems to be, because of forums like this, because of all different kinds of things, more pressure on the industry, so that I think we may start to see some response, some of this movement, so-called privacy by design, where when you start to offer a new product, you actually get people who are concerned about the privacy implications involved from the beginning. Too frequently in the past, the engineers would start doing something, and just before it was ready to be launched, they'd say, oh yeah, this has privacy implications. And if we can build it in from the beginning, that could help. And again, the FTC is pushing for that.
Engineering worlds. And in fact, one of the kind of important areas of education is I don't believe that you should get an engineering degree in this country anymore without having cyber training. I really think, if we have our architects building bridges where a few million people go over, and we have hundreds of millions of people going over on our networks, and we aren't training these people on security, I think that that's a huge, huge problem. And there probably should be some sort of a certification to that effect. So I think it's a trend. I think the other side of the trend is very fascinating to me as a privacy person in a security company. We actually need a lot of information to secure the internet. So when we do not track legislation, we absolutely have to be very careful that we craft it so that we can still capture enough information so that we can do things like antivirus, anti-spam, malware, and predictive analysis to make sure that we're not protecting the privacy of the pornographers and the spammers as well, which is it's a problem that I come up with every single day, particularly with foreign jurisdictions where they have very strong national privacy legislation, and they, I get from their security folks a request to get all of the data that we hold on our customers. I have to say no, because we also are bound by the privacy laws in those countries, and so it's kind of a push me, pull me that has to be recognized. That tension is there when we think about do not track.
Go ahead.
I think we don't do enough to protect children. Those of us who are in the business of protecting children, like I am and like most of the people here today, we get it. We understand the dangers. We know from firsthand day-to-day experience what, that's a marching band. We understand, that's right. I'm sure that's what it is. But I think that we as a society don't do enough to protect children. And I think from a parent, I think it's incumbent sort of on everybody to sort of rally around the kids because they can't protect themselves. And so it's up to us, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's industry, whether it's government, to protect them because they can't protect themselves. And I think parents, who are sort of the ultimate people with the responsibility for protecting children, are so afraid of this technology. They're so afraid of, the kids are all now being issued iPads at school. And I did a presentation for kindergartners the other day, and they all had iPads. And, they all, know how to scroll. And not to mention how good they are at the keypad. But the parents get, other than what they heard from me and a little bit from the school, they don't get any instruction. So the kids are way smarter than we are, but they can't protect themselves in our society. So I do think it's incumbent upon us to pass legislation and to have it be different when it comes to minors, because they can't protect themselves.
Yeah, in Sacramento, obviously, we're in the business of looking at these issues and regulating when necessary. Obviously, we hear a lot in Sacramento, why are you regulating? Why don't you just let the market take care of itself? So that's the argument we always hear on the other side. But whose role really is that to protect the children? Should it be government? Should internet providers be more involved in this on their own initiatives? Where does it lie? I've read several articles, some of which have said, well, we left it up to the marketplace for the internet to work on privacy issues, and they haven't gone in that direction, or at least not far enough in that direction. So where do you draw that line? Whose responsibility is it?
In my presentations, I primarily speak to either educators or parents or law enforcement when I'm doing my trainings. And I really have the opinion that sort of the buck stops with the parents, because they're their kids, and they're the ones, for the most part, who are putting the technology in the hands of these children who really, we all know that children's brains aren't fully developed until they're 25. So all that, conflict resolution and judgment, that isn't finished forming until they get to be that age. So we're as parents, we're putting this technology, these iPhones and these iPads and these laptops, in the hands of kids who really aren't capable of using them safely or properly. And so we can't, and then the kids do something like, get involved in sextortion or sexting pictures, and immediately as parents we say, what were you thinking? Well, they can't, because their brains don't work that way. So I think, so the buck stops with the parents as far as educating them, kind of getting their heads out of the sand, not having them, leave my presentations wide-eyed because they just learned about geotagging that they'd never heard of before. And, the responsibility is on them, to have them step up and educate themselves, but then, of course, who's going to do the educating? All the rest of us.
I think ultimately the responsibility comes back to the parent, but I think that corporate entities have a very real responsibility to provide necessary tools to parents and to children, and I don't think that there's been a good record of that. And I think it may be improving, and that's partly because the heat is being put on these people, and I think that's a good thing. The other thing I just wanted to add here, that you sometimes hear in these sorts of things that it is a binary trade-off between privacy on the one hand and freedom and business on an open internet on the other hand, and that is a false framing of the issue. The fact of the matter is that the internet really is only conducive to business because of some very, very important privacy innovations. If it weren't for HTTPS encryption, you wouldn't be able to send credit cards over the internet and do that kind of business. It's a very important privacy thing. If it weren't for some of the things that McAfee does to make the environment safe and protect you from malware. So privacy and privacy innovation is a key to a successful, vibrant internet, and giving consumers some of the tools that they need to protect their information and their kids' information is exactly, and sometimes that comes by regulation, sometimes it can become by self-regulatory industry models, but whatever, doing that then builds an internet that is vibrant and free and is an economic driver. But for some reason I don't understand, many of the people in Silicon Valley want to oppose the two and frame it, it's either privacy or it's innovation, and that's just wrong.
I agree with that. And so I'll tell you a program that I'm really excited about now. I'm at McAfee, so it's hard to say. This is also very self-serving, and then there's nothing wrong in business with being self-serving. But a program that we've done, we've got 6,500 McAfee employees. We've been bought by Intel, so we're hoping to wander over to the other 100,000 as we get along. But what we did is we provided a training, and it's about being a global cyber citizen. So whether you're an admin, whether you work at our gym, I don't care what you do, you get enough information, you get a curricula so that you can go into your local senior center, you can go into your elementary school. We want to know, as part of your goals every year, what you've done in the community to educate the community within your own sphere of personal influence. My head fake, I'm training my entire staff about privacy and security policy. So for me, it's a great way to make people feel good about themselves and actually feel good about my job when I'm kind of bad cop sometimes and I come in and I slow things down. But I think every company has the opportunity to do a similar thing. You know, do what you are natively training them to do as workers, but don't make the mistake I made and leave your family behind. I've traveled the world trying to make privacy policies better, and my kid is hit twice. I'm never going to make that mistake again, and I don't want any employee to ever make that mistake again. So we can actually kind of win on so many different fronts by just being a little more creative with this issue and being true cyber citizens.
That's great. I obviously have an opinion with regard to the question that I asked earlier with regard to whose role is it to really step in and do something about privacy on the internet. And I obviously believe that the legislature plays a great role in that. And that didn't just fall out of the sky. I came to that conclusion based on the number of contacts that I received from people asking, well, what are you going to do about this? Here's stories that happened to my family, horror stories. What are you going to do about making my child more safe? Those sorts of things. So clearly, I believe that there is a role of the legislature, and obviously there are plenty of people who agree with that and plenty of advocates who come to Sacramento to try to work on these issues of internet privacy. But, obviously there was quite a debate this year when we worked on the privacy legislation. And we did hear, well, once again, why don't you just leave this up to industry? If you try to regulate, it will harm the internet will not be successful, it will no longer grow, and those are all arguments that were made. So I throw that out because obviously, I think we would want to also encourage corporate behavior so that there would be more self-regulation, and I do believe people are asking for it, but they may be asking me more about it than you, which it sounds like. But how do we get there? How do we push for more self-regulatory actions? How do we get there? If like you say, people want to fight the regulation by the state, then how do we get to the point where industry is stepping up? Clearly all the panels we've heard today, this is an issue, this is a problem, it is not going away. People are being hurt, children are being hurt, it's impacting them in the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. It's a growing problem. So how do we get more responsible self-regulatory behavior? Do we get there? Please, I'd love to hear from all of you on that.
Well, you do it on a number of fronts. I mean, things like this help raise the issue. Sometimes legislation is a big stick that is, companies are afraid of the possibility that this law will actually get passed, so they come up with a solution. Another thing you sometimes do is you embarrass, you don't do this, but I do this. I mean, my job is sometimes known as Hellraiser, and so I sometimes go and ask people like Eric Schmidt, who is the chairman of Google, embarrassing questions, or stage a sort of track-in in the Dirksen Senate office building when he was going to testify, having people who were mimes in suits that said Google Google track team following everybody around saying, this is what it's like to be followed in real life. What do you think it's like to be followed in cyberspace? Now, you know, that got maybe 50 television cameras, and it really raised the issue. It also got Eric a little bit mad at me, and Pablo Chavez, who is one of their top lobbyists, I don't think will talk to me ever again. But it got the issue out there. So it seems to me you do these kinds of things on lots of fronts, and you sometimes make a point of pointing out a little bit of the hypocrisy on some of these executives. Not too long ago, I think it was back in 2007, there was a reporter for a site called CNET, which is one of the best technological sites out there, news sites. And she, as a story, this was just when Google was really being great with its search engine, Googled Eric Schmidt, the then chairman, and wrote a story about all the things that she found out about him, political contributions and all that stuff. He was indignant. And he banned CNET from interviewing Google executives for a year. Now, that kind of hypocrisy is something that these guys got to be called on. So, I mean, there are different roles for different people. The legislators do certain kinds of things, advocates do something else, parents do something else. And I think it's a multi-faceted effort, and we are slowly moving in the, we're now at a point where we're all aware that something's got to happen. There is legislation in the pipeline. There is an industry response, and I think on an optimistic day, I feel like we're lurching along in the right direction. I'd like to get to the right place sooner rather than later, but I think we're going to get there.
And you talked about some polling that is showing that people are looking for this type of action a little earlier. Could you just mention that
we
again?
did a poll on whether people generally supported the notion of do not track, and I think it was 80% supported the do not track concept, and 90% said they wanted to see some kind of privacy, online privacy legislation. And people were very concerned about it. You know, it's rare that you get that kind of numbers. Another telling thing is right now, I mean, there is bipartisan agreement, if there can be such a thing, in Washington, D.C. right now, around the I just came from a conference there yesterday where the FTC chairman spoke. And there was genuine consensus emerging about the need to do something around online privacy. I don't know that the legislation will get passed, but I mean it's all being discussed in a way that's very positive, which is having an impact on the industry. And industry is, you know, starting to respond because they see the possibility of legislation.
I know Michelle wants to chime in on this, but I'll just say really quickly that one of the things that I think you're right. I think that slowly but surely everybody's jumping on board, and I think it's a slow process. And us, together with you, together with industry, together with parents, together with educators, it's going to have to be all of us together doing it. And one of the things that last year we did as part of our task force was we thought one of the things we could do is create a PSA. Because, you know, people have television on and they, you know, usually respond fairly well if it's a good, well-done PSA. So we did one, did it last year. It's gotten really rave reviews. It's still running on most Southern California television stations. I have people all the time coming up and say, yeah, I saw your PSA. But what most people don't know is that it was paid for by MySpace. And they're part of our task force and they paid for it. And so I think that's kind of an indication. First, them sitting on our task force, and secondly, being willing to do something like that. It's kind of an indication to all of us that if we kind of keep pushing and keep kind of pushing all together, that we can, you know, sort of get the word out and help you get that legislation passed.
Great.
Yeah, and I think, so as far as legislation goes, in particular, I'm very transfixed on this child issue because nobody will profit. I think there's always someone else who, like the do not track, people are going to profit if you pass do not track, people are going to profit if you don't. You know, it's one of those issues that maybe it will, maybe it won't, but kids are not going to be protected on their own. So going after the perpetrators and coming up with real penalties for these folks, making sure that law enforcement agencies are educated so that they don't look at a parent that comes to them and says, my child's identity has been stolen, and they don't get the unfortunately, very common response that says, no real crime has been committed here because your child doesn't have a credit card. So what could possibly be the loss? And meanwhile, it can be, obviously very devastating. So going after the real harm, I think, is one thing. We've been in support of federal legislation for privacy and omnibus bill for a long time. It's something that we, as an industry, we do want that kind of regulation because I don't operate just in the U.S. I haven't in the last 3 companies I've worked for. I work globally. And by not having a federal bill for privacy makes it very, very difficult for us to do business internationally. And we're viewed in a very negative light with our trading partners in Europe and Canada and even Argentina, which is deemed incredibly an adequate place to do business rather than the United States. So we're not universally anti-legislation at all.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. So not doing privacy legislation is not good for business.
Yeah, well, I think where we're faced
I'm
with...
sorry, I sort of put words in your mouth, but I was just...
No, I
but I see what you say, because
I think it's true in certain...
you don't have a standardization across countries, and obviously
Exactly.
you have a global market that you sell to.
Right.
But that's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah,
that-
it makes it actually easier for us to get business done, to have a standard, whereas the state pockmark of breach laws means that we're probably not compliant anytime there's a breach of any magnitude, because you simply can't be with all the varying identifications.
Very interesting.
Everyone that I've talked to in business, to me at least, has professed the need to have clarity, but the other issue that you just alluded to with breach is that I think there is a great reluctance to see states do it. They'd prefer to see a federal legislation. However, let me tell you this, the feds, when I tell them this, all say, please keep it up in California, keep the heat on the California legislature, because the Californians often set the trend for the nation. And if California, California ran the do not call list for 2 years before it was adopted nationally. So we're looked to as someone who sets trends, and particularly in areas of privacy. So my word would be, keep pushing, and it may get the feds to do the right thing.
I don't give up easily. Any other comments on that one?
Here to DC.
So let's just close on a question. Do we think that these safety risks and loss of privacy associated with use of the internet that we heard about today, do you think that we're seeing a trend where things will be getting worse, or do we think things may start to be curbed based on people's reaction and understanding of the problem? Are we there yet, or?
So we'll start with Pollyanna this time. We'll go down to John. So I actually think it's getting better, and here's why. Because I think, and it goes back to what was said earlier in the day, which is you have to look at the value of all of this interaction. What does this all mean? What is this all getting to? And I think the coolest thing is I have 26 nieces and nephews. We're Irish. It's what we do. So my older batch of nieces and nephews are now young men and women, and they've grown up online, if you will. And I have had, and I am their friend. I'm kind of the cool aunt because I work in Silicon Valley, which I'm devastatingly uncool in real life. But I'm the one who, like my nephew, put on there, I'm getting my sexy haircut, and I'm like, you are getting sexy nothing. I remember changing your pants, young man. But I think the cool thing is watching these younger kids, they actually have a great sense of privacy. They know what they want to keep secret. They know the technology better than we do. They certainly know how to get around their parents and anyone else they want to skirt. They understand strong passwords. They understand encryption tools. So what we need next is to impress upon them this layer of judgment as they go into adulthood. And so we will have the first generation of digital natives who are starting to enter the age of maturity. And I think now we're going to have very interesting dialogues. I think these are the people who actually are going to knock on Zuckerberg's door and say, this is what I demand. This is what I need, because this Facebook tool is not just a dalliance for me, it's important to me. And so hopefully they will start to now vote with their dollars
whether that's going back to MySpace or what we're starting to see is a bunch of enclaves of absolutely brand new social networking sites that say, we reject that model, we don't like having our information sold, we're willing to go to a paid-for model, which is the alternative to tracking. Unfortunately, right now, that's the alternative business model, but kids are willing to do that. So I'm very positive that we're going to work out what is this digital tension with this upcoming kind of groundswell of young entrepreneurs.
They'll also be the engineers and the internet execs of the future as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. And what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a prosecutor, so I will leave here and go back to my desk with a stack of cases of predators and 528 cases, and I got job security in that. And so unfortunately, we go from Pollyanna to back down the row here, but I don't see it letting up, and I want it to, and I'll head out and talk to as many schools and as many groups as I can to put myself out of a job. But right now, it's not this kind of business, but it's a business that's keeping us busy every day, unfortunately.
I don't think that there's a heck of a lot more evil in the world today than there used to be, that there are new tools and techniques of wrongdoing being done because of the digital world. And I see a demand emerging to give people more control over that is going to, one way or another, be responded to. I mean, I would call myself a cynical realist, but an optimist, because I think it's going to move in the right direction, partly because of consumers' demands, partly because people will get educated and demand to have the tools necessary to have the protections. And there are also going to be a little bit of a change in societal values and what constitutes the appropriate degree of sharing and that sort of thing. And it used to be that a lot of your past was forgotten. I mean, there was sort of the right to be forgotten because all this stuff was put away in musty old files that could be dug out if somebody really, 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 really wanted to, and maybe they would do it if you were running for office, but most people wouldn't have to face up to that. Well, now it's right there in the internet. So, yeah, click, click, click. But maybe because it's so available and it doesn't kind of just get out of everyone's collective memory, we'll start to be a little more indulgent towards allowing one or two foolish mistakes when you were in college and shouldn't have posted that picture. I mean, that kind of societal thing may also help a little bit. But right now, I think the important thing is that people get educated about what's going on and that they demand the tools to have better control, because we are in a transitional sort of period.
Yes, thank you. Now we have time for a question, perhaps. If there are anyone here in the audience that would like to ask a question, we can do that. If not, I'm going to make some quick closing remarks and close out the hearing, or the meeting that we're having today. First of all, let me thank all of the panelists that were here today, and thank you to you. Very, very interesting discussion, and I've certainly got some great ideas and would love to talk with all of you further as well. And thank you for your advocacy on this issue as well. I also want to thank the audience, obviously, for being here today and contributing with the questions that we did have through the meeting. And I think that one thing we see now, it is a little clearer than it was 3 hours ago when we started, that how profound an impact social networking, what an impact it has on society. And I've had some ideas, and I hear from people all the time, but today really brings it home from your testimony and testimony of all of the previous panels. And this is something we're dealing with throughout our communities, throughout our neighborhoods. And just the positive idea of sharing information and social networking. It can be very positive, but there are some dangers, and there's some things that we should be doing. Hopefully some of it can be voluntarily, some it will have to be regulatory, in order to protect our children and adults as well. And I think probably what concerned me the most before this meeting, but continues to based on what I've heard, is just the vulnerability of children. They are so very innocent. They are using this new technology. It's exciting, it's interesting. You don't have to be bored. You know, the old, Mom, I'm bored. You can get on the internet and not be bored for hours, right? I know I can be on the internet for hours and not be bored. But the fact that young children are so very unaware of the dangers of sharing information. They may innocently be just sending something to their friend and not realizing that they're sitting in their own room, but the ability to contact them and the information that they have shared can be found by anyone, and sadly, people who wish to target them for anything from identity theft to stalking or things even worse than that. So glad that we had the opportunity to have this discussion. As we've heard today, there's many ways to approach the problem. There's many strong advocates working hard on the issue. Obviously, good parenting is a very, very important component of all of this. Knowing what your children are doing and helping them, sitting with them and helping them learn about the internet and what those risks and dangers that they might be subject to. But we also must be very real. Social networking on the internet is exploding. You can't keep children off. We heard the statistic a little earlier today in the testimony. Children under 13 are not supposed to have social network sites, but we know that over 7.5 million children do have social network sites. So there's obviously something we need to do about that, and those numbers are growing daily. I wanted to mention that we did invite other representatives of the internet industry to be here today. We invited Tech America, we invited TechNet, and we invited the Internet Alliance. Unfortunately, they all declined. They were not available to be with us today. And I do have to say it's a bit disappointing, because I think their testimony and what they would have to say would be very important to this overall discussion. And I do hope that after today we can continue that discussion with folks in the industry as well. So, I welcome their comments. From the first day I decided to carry legislation on this issue, I've tried to involve the industry and to work with them on ways that we can protect people, adults and children alike. And I'm not ready to give up on that. I have to say it was a little bit of a tough road, but I'm not ready to give up on working on the issue, and I'm not ready to give up on working with the industry to come up with a solution, because I really think that is the way. I honestly believe, and this is based on everything I hear, that these are the kinds of things consumers are asking for. They're asking for safety on the internet. They're asking for protection of their children. So let's all figure out a way to work together. So I renew my invitation to the industry to join me and to join Sheriff Baca and other law enforcement leaders, and let's figure it out together. Let's tackle this problem. Let's do something about it. We can't ignore it. We can't make it go away. It's going to continue. I will be having some more public discussions on the issue, and I do hope that we do have people from all sides of the issue available to participate. And as you know, a little earlier today, I started the discussion with an analogy to the auto industry. And of course, like automobiles, the internet and social networking are here to stay. We just need to learn how to drive it safely. And I don't think anyone in this room would dispute the awesome power and the promise of the internet and the value to our society. But obviously, as responsible elected officials, it is our responsibility to protect our children as well. So it is the responsible thing to do, and I look forward to continued discussions and working with all of you, and very, very happy that we've had the opportunity to have this discussion today. So let me pause and just, if you could please join me in thanking this panel for their hard work today, and appreciate all of your comments and your advocacy on this subject. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. That concludes today's summit. Thank you.
This is Senate TV.